You are listening to Perplexity.
Today, we will be concluding the story of arguably the most famous murder mystery in the history of France. On April the 21st, 2011, police discovered the bodies of Agnès Dupont de Ligonnes, her 4 children, Achu, Thomas, Anne, and Benoît, along with their 2 Labrador dogs, buried in the back garden of their family home at 55 Boulevard Schuman in Nantes, Loire-Atlantique, France. Agnès' husband, Xavier, was nowhere to be found. This was a picture-perfect family, stemming from nobility and Catholicism. They were full of personality and intelligence. They were well known and involved in their community. But throughout the investigation into these murders, it became apparent to police this family had deep and troubling secrets. In the coming weeks, Xavier would become the prime suspect in these murders. He remains missing to this day. This is L'Affaire Dupont de Ligonnes, the case of the Dupont de Ligonnès family. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Perplexity, a mystery podcast. As always, I am your host, Kadra. If you're new to the show, hello and welcome. I tell tales every single week that have perplexed me. So if you love a good mystery that leaves you wanting more, don't worry, you're in the right place. And if you end up enjoying today's episode, I would absolutely love it if you continued to follow along. If you are a returning listener, hello, my friends, welcome back. So happy you're here. We are wrapping up this true crime deep dive today. This is part 2 of 2. So if you missed part 1, be sure to go listen to that. I will have it linked in the show notes. In part 1, we really delved into the background of the Dupont de Ligonnès family. We talked about the marital troubles that Xavier and Agnes were experiencing. And we started to get into some important background with Xavier's family that plays into theories. We got into some different timelines around the investigation, but I have a lot more for you today. And at the end, we will get into theories as to where Xavier could be or what happened to him. Like I made it very clear in part 1, I think it's very obvious that Xavier murdered his family. I don't think that that's up for discussion when you really delve into and learn more about this case, but what a rabbit hole this has been. I'm looking forward to wrapping it up with you guys. Just want to remind everybody, this episode will contain disturbing content, so this episode may not be for you. Listener discretion is advised when listening, and all the sources used for today's episode will be available down in the show notes. Also, just a quick reminder that I'm continuing to release bonus content on Patreon a couple times a month, so go check out patreon.com/perplexitymysterypodcast if that interests you. I'm currently covering the Gabby Petito Netflix documentary. So without further ado, let's conclude this deep dive into one of the most famous murder mysteries in all of France, the murders of the Dupont de Ligonnès family. So on part 1, we left off on April 11th, 2011. Xavier and Agnes' families had just received a typed, unsigned, 8-page letter allegedly written by Xavier. This letter immediately led to Agnes' family being very suspicious of where the family had really gone. Chapter 5, the DEA. The letter read, quote, "Hi everyone. Huge surprise. We have to leave urgently for the U.S. due to a very particular set of circumstances that we will explain below. You're receiving this letter by conventional post because for the next few years, we cannot communicate any other way. No emails, no texts, no phone calls, for safety reasons. When you read this letter, we will no longer be in France and we won't be able to return for an as yet undetermined period of time, parentheses, a few years. You must be wondering what's going on. Here's the story, at least as much as we are allowed to say. This letter is the only correspondence we are allowed to write, which might be good news for some of you. And it has been checked before being sent to you. When we started our company in Miami in 2003, we were put into contact through the person who helped us start the company with the Drug Enforcement Administration. a sort of American drug squad with agents on the ground in several countries, who were looking for a French national to infiltrate the French nightclub scene to obtain information about drug trafficking and money laundering networks without drawing attention to themselves. Through the route des commerciaux, I found myself in a different city every evening, with a legitimate reason to make contact with nightclub bosses to invite them to be listed in the leisure section of the RDC. I, Xavier, was the ideal candidate. So once I was tested and briefed, I accepted my mission of working incognito for the DEA under the condition I maintain secrecy, which includes, even more importantly, the children. With the information that I, Xavier, have collected in this time, I have become a key witness in an upcoming trial involving major international drug trafficking kingpins. The trial will have to take place in the US in the next few years. The date has not yet been determined. What complicates matters is that certain tips had recently led us to believe that my cover may have been blown, and unfortunately we received confirmation of this yesterday. Therefore, the situation has now become potentially dangerous for us here and has required us to take emergency measures. When I first went undercover, I accepted that I might be placed into the Federal Witness Protection Program. This is what we now have to do. And we're not doing it with any excitement, but because it's necessary and there's no way around it. So we've been taken into the protective custody of the US government and transferred to the US. We have new identities, which must, of course, be kept secret. By the time you read this letter, we will officially no longer exist as French citizens. We will be lambda US citizens, living in the US like any other US citizen, except we will be forbidden from communicating with our family and friends for an undetermined period of time, at least until the trial is over. Important. Tell the youngsters not to divulge any information on Facebook and not to be surprised if the kids do not reply. The children's schools are aware, as are Achu's and Thomas' landlords and Agnes's and Achu's employers. The official story is that we've been transferred to Australia for work, without providing any specific details. It would be good if you could spread this false story on Facebook and elsewhere. We hope it doesn't drag on for too many years, but we're still anxious about how long the legal proceedings in the US will take. In a while from now, we will be able to send you some information by post. We have designated Emmanuel as the central contact, as he has the advantage of knowing almost all of you. He will be the one who receives letters to be sent on to you. He will receive instructions in good time. Of course, we send all our love and are thinking of you very much during this enforced separation. Take good care of yourselves. We'll have so many stories to tell you later on." End quote. The fact that anyone bought this or is buying this whole DEA thing is crazy to me, especially knowing where Xavier went and what he did in the days after his family's gruesome deaths. We'll unpack a lot more about this letter later, but what a story. Chapter 6. The Pilgrimage. Later in the day, on April 11th, 2011, police officially announced they believed Xavier was on the run and he was now being considered a fugitive. But unlike most criminals on the run, Xavier wasn't exactly hiding. He was clearly seen up close on CCTV footage withdrawing money with his own bank card. He then racked up dozens of credit card charges, going out to eat. He spent the night at a hotel, Hotel Premier Classe in Blagnac, near Toulouse in southern France, literally drawing out a map for police of his whereabouts. Tuesday, April 12th, Xavier spent the night at a fancy hotel, the Auberge de Cassan in La Ponte in Vaucluse in southeastern France. I'm so sorry if I'm butchering these names. He once again paid with a credit card, wearing a fancy suit. He bought expensive alcohol, and according to witnesses, he seemed relaxed and aloof. Police interpreted this trip throughout the south of France as his pilgrimage. Xavier was very reckless with concealing his location because he didn't care if he was caught. Police believe Xavier planned at this time to complete suicide, like 98% of familicide perpetrators. He was also traveling to places of special significance to him. La Rochelle is where he lived with Agnes during the first years of their marriage. Toulouse is where some of his children were born. The South is where he spent many happy years of his life. So perhaps he ended his life there, in Roquebrune-sur-Arienne, where he had last been happy. By the time it was Wednesday, April the 13th, neighbors had become concerned about the well-being of the Dupont de Ligonnes family. They called the police. They noticed that the house's shutters had been closed for more than a week, and Agnes's car had been parked outside on the street this entire time. Xavier spent the night April 13th and 14th at a hotel in La Seine-sur-Mer, southeastern France. This was his home in the 80s. A former girlfriend from that time informed the police that Xavier had contacted her that evening, although they didn't meet. Thursday, April 14th, Xavier then withdrew €30 from an ATM in Roquebrune-sur-Agda in the Var. That evening, Xavier slept in the Hotel Formule 1 in the town, and the next day he was captured on surveillance camera at 4:15 p.m. This is very famous footage. In this footage, you can see him crossing the hotel parking lot, and he's carrying this big bag that seems to contain this long object. Police believe this is the .22 long rifle that he had inherited from Hubert, his father, the same type of weapon that was used to murder Agnes and the 4 children. This weapon has never been found. And one of the most chilling and sinister things about this footage is he looks into the camera and says goodbye. This was the last known sighting of Xavier. Friday, April 15th, police had returned to the house for further investigation. They found photos were missing from their frames, but nothing else appeared out of the ordinary. April 18th, 19th, and 20th, the police came to the house again, but they continued to find nothing. Chapter 7. Bodies. It wasn't until the 6th police visit on April the 21st the bodies were found. Many people believe Xavier was narcissistic enough to believe his family would believe him, that he and his family had left the country on their own volition, and that no one would ever find the bodies in the backyard. At the exact same time the bodies were found, the district attorney was holding a press conference announcing the family's disappearance was going to be investigated. An international warrant was issued for Xavier, and he became the prime suspect. Autopsies were done April the 22nd. The entire family was found in their pajamas and appeared to have been methodically executed in their sleep. Agnes had been shot twice in the head. Some sources claim no drugs were found in her system. Other sources say that an antidepressant, citalopram, was found. She also had a sleep apnea machine that helped her sleep, and this machine was suddenly turned off at 3 a.m. on the morning of April 3rd or 4th. Achu was shot twice in the head. A sleeping pill, lomertazepam, was found in his system. An had been shot twice in the head at very close range, and lomertazepam, the sleeping pill, was also found in her system. Some sources say Benoît was also shot twice in the head. Others say Benoît was shot 3 times in the head and twice in the chest. Lomertazepam was also found in his system. Thomas was shot 2 times in the head and once in the chest. Lomertazepam was also in his system. To some, part of the problem with this whole case is that the autopsies seem botched. The family's death certificates were made on site as soon as they were taken out of the ground, without DNA testing or anyone in the family attesting to their identities, which really played into these conspiracy theories that the family faked their deaths and really were in the witness protection program. The police released details to Agnes and Xavier's families as well that were not consistent with the victims. For example, they confused Thomas and Achu, giving heights and weights that did not seem accurate. They described Achu as being too short and too thin. They described Agnes as being much heavier than she was. They also said she was a brunette when she clearly had grayish-white hair. It's widely believed Agnes was the first victim, and the children were killed later, with Achu, Anne, and Benoît being killed around the same time, Sunday to Monday, as they were buried in a grave all together. and Thomas being killed later as he was buried in a separate grave nearby. And we discussed the timeline of this in part 1. Some sources say no traces of blood were found in any of the bedrooms, really anywhere in the house. But other sources I found claim that there was evidence that the kitchen was at one point covered in blood and then cleaned up, with some blood droplets being found on the kitchen table and the table legs. The blood was later identified, according to these sources, to belong to Agnes and Thomas. It's also said by some the blood was found on Achu's mattress as well and had been cleaned up, and a rifle casing was found in Benoit's desk. Investigators also dusted everywhere for fingerprints, they swabbed everywhere for DNA, and apparently they found nothing. I don't know if that means they found no other DNA or fingerprints belonging to anyone outside of the family, or if this means the place was wiped clean. But this is according to the Unsolved Mysteries episode, and I would really like clarification on this because that's pretty important. If they didn't find any DNA or fingerprints belonging to anyone outside of the family, then it's quite obvious, in my opinion, and it still is, what happened here, that Xavier was responsible. If the whole place was wiped clean, then maybe he had help, maybe he was really taking his time. He had a whole week inside the house to clean everything before he fled. On April 22nd, the day after the bodies were discovered, there was also a massive search party effort to locate Xavier. Police found Xavier's missing car, the C5, in the parking lot of a small Formula One hotel in Roquebrune-sur-Arienne in the south of France. For months, police and volunteers searched the mountains near this hotel. They looked in isolated nooks and crannies, caves in the mountainside, but no clues, no body, nothing was ever allegedly found. The bodies of Agnes and her children were cremated and buried April the 28th. The surprising speed of this procedure, combined with the fact that the relatives were advised not to look at the bodies, led some of Xavier's relatives to believe the bodies recovered were not those of Agnes and her children. And part of me gets it. It has to be incredibly hard to come to terms with something this horrific. And then also on top of that, having to come to terms with the possibility that your loved one, your son, brother, whoever, did this. But if you really look at this logically, it was Xavier. Throughout the police investigation, it was found Xavier was a member of a Catholic online forum, and in 2010, he asked about the meaning of sacrifice. He stated he recently had become aggressive. Xavier was involved in various theological discussions under several different online identities on the Christian forum La Cité Catholique and was eventually banned from the forum. According to a source close to Xavier, he was also, quote, never to set foot inside of a church. The investigation led to more than 800 tips, as well as searches that would all lead to dead ends. So flashing forward to about 2 years after the murders, June 2013, a body was found 20 kilometers or 12 miles from where Xavier was last seen. An autopsy was carried out and didn't completely exclude the possibility of the body belonging to Xavier. The prosecutor in Draguignan, Danielle Droy-Ayral, said, quote, at this moment in time, it's not the body of Xavier. But they didn't provide any more details. And I couldn't find anything else about this, but from what I found online, it's pretty obvious this was not the body of Xavier. They were eventually able to rule that out. So then the next big potential lead of what happened to Xavier came in April of 2015. On the evening of Tuesday, the 28th of April, a walker discovered bones in a forest in Benoît and Forêt near Fréjus on the south coast of France, close to where Xavier was last seen. The police made a link with Xavier's disappearance and analyzed what appeared to be a survival camp. Other objects in this camp were also found, including an empty wallet, a lighter, a pair of glasses, a sleeping bag, a magazine from 2010, and a bill dating from 2011. A medical pen was also allegedly found and the unknown decedent's forearm bone. But as far as the police were aware, Xavier didn't have a medical device in his forearm, even though it's not impossible that he may have been operated on after his disappearance. But on May 1st, 2015, it was reported DNA obtained from this body confirmed this was not a match to Xavier. Chapter 8. Dead or alive. In July of 2015, a Nantes journalist received a photograph. On the back of this photograph was a handwritten note that went viral. The message read, quote, "I am still alive." The picture showed two of the children, Agnes and Benoît, sitting at a kitchen table. Some believe that Xavier sent this note. Others believe it was a sick joke from a troll. And obviously, they could send people in, experts, to do handwriting analysis on this, but I haven't heard anything else about what they discovered with this note. Part of what's frustrating about this is that, with internet sleuthers, we could look at Xavier's writings, all those things that he had written, all the letters, but they're all typed. So you can't really find his handwriting online to compare, but you can look at the handwriting for this. To me, it appears that it was written by a male. It's in capital letters. I'll put the picture in the YouTube video and on the Instagram page. But this could also be a troll. There are sick people out there. There was another manhunt for Xavier in 2016 after his likeness was picked up on a casino CCTV camera in Nantes-Loire-Atlantique. Caves and mountainsides were combed through on the ground and by helicopter. And I will put this picture again on the Instagram and in the YouTube video. Tell me what you guys think. This looks a lot like Xavier to me, but again, part of the problem is he looks a little bit like everybody. On January 9th, 2018, police raided the Saint Desert Monastery in Roquebrune-sur-Arnienne, and this was again the village where Xavier was last seen. Several worshippers had claimed to have seen him hiding there. Police initially struggled to make any headway with this monastery, though, because the monks had taken a vow of silence. But after a couple hours of searching, the police allegedly determined the reports were a case of mistaken identity, as the person believed to be Xavier was just another monk who happened to look like him. On October 11th, 2019, a man was arrested at the Glasgow airport in Scotland after arriving on a flight from Paris Charles de Gaulle Airport. A passenger who was booked onto a Paris-Glasgow flight for Saturday, the 12th of October, entered in details corresponding to a stolen French passport. The passenger was arrested by Scotland police, but French authorities that studied the CCTV images were very confident this was not Xavier. Additionally, the Scottish police refused to send them the fingerprinting results. On October 12th, it was announced this man was not Xavier, but a 69-year-old Portuguese-born French national that had been visiting his Scottish wife. Subsequent fingerprinting and DNA testing provided definitively this was not Xavier. And this case led to a lot of criticism, understandably, towards French media and police, because pretty much immediately after this guy was captured, the French media was proudly boasting that they had caught Xavier. There wasn't even confirmation, and they were like, "We got him."
Suspected of murdering his wife and their 4 children, he was traveling under a false name when he boarded a flight at Charles de Gaulle Airport. Paris police identified him, but not before the flight took off. So they warned Interpol, and police in Glasgow were waiting for him when the flight landed. Dupont de Ligonnes had gone to great lengths to disguise his appearance, even undergoing cosmetic surgery. Investigators were able to identify him by his fingerprints. It's a turning point in one of the biggest criminal cases of the last decade in France. On April 21st of 2011, 5 members of the Dupont de Ligonnes family were found buried under the patio of the family home in Nantes. An investigation revealed that they had all been shot and that Xavier Dupont de Ligonnès had bought ammunition and a silencer a few weeks before the killings. There was no sign of the patriarch of the family, and investigators spent years searching for him. Despite an international arrest warrant, he evaded police. Before his arrest Friday, Xavier Dupont de Ligonnès was last seen in the department of Var in southern France on April 14, 2011. At the time, he was caught on camera withdrawing money from an ATM.
This is frustrating too, because to this day, I'll go on like different YouTube videos and I'll read these comments that were like, didn't you hear he was caught in 2019? And he wasn't. It's completely false. That same year, 2019, Unsolved Mysteries covered the case, which brought the story more traction again, and a seemingly credible witness came forward after watching the show. This anonymous witness claimed they saw Xavier on Lakeshore Drive in Chicago, and they included a photo that looks a lot like Xavier. There have been no other major known reports regarding Xavier's whereabouts since. Chapter 9. Theories. There are endless theories, I cannot emphasize that enough, about this case. But the two overarching beliefs are that either A, Xavier completed suicide after the murders, which is what happens in 98% of familicide cases, or B, he's such a narcissist that he is in the 1 to 2% of these murderers that flees and starts a new life. If he did flee and start a new life, his trip to the south of France could have been a red herring. Xavier could have known that eventually police would spot him on that security footage, and that this would lead police on a wild goose chase, searching the nearby mountains and leading them to believe he had completed suicide. This sighting may have bought Xavier some time to flee to another city or country. As for the motive for these gruesome murders, Xavier could have been trying to save face. He could have murdered his family because he couldn't bear to face the truth. He was a failed businessman. His entire life was about to be ripped out from under him, and his family would learn he was a failure. During my research into this case, I started reading about familicide. In other famous cases of familicide, John List, Chris Watts, I've always wondered what could possess a man to do these things to his wife and family. I kept coming across works from Yardley, Wilson, and Linz. They developed what is known as the typology of familicide, and they divided family annihilators into 4 groups: anomic, disappointed, self-righteous, and paranoid. In the anomic category are offenders who view their families as being nothing more than a status symbol. They kill their family when their economic status declines. In the disappointed group, the offender seeks revenge on their family for not living up to their unrealistic expectations. In the self-righteous group, the offender kills their family to get revenge on the mother, blaming her for their problems. And finally, in the paranoid group, the offender kills their family in an attempt to protect them from something worse. Most people, though there are different opinions, tend to believe that Xavier fell into the first category, anomic. He was incredibly narcissistic and couldn't stand to be seen by the public in a negative light. His family was nothing more than a status symbol to him. And when the family unit financially began to crumble, he thought killing them was the equivalent of doing them a favor. There are also several theories as to how Xavier got away and was never found. Number 1, Xavier was aided by some type of secret network or covert group. With his financial difficulties and elite ties, he could have gotten help from a secret network to vanish. Xavier also had created NetSurf Concept LLC, a company recorded on the commercial register in Florida in the United States. His advisor, Gerard Corona, is a French immigrant that specializes in assisting foreigners with administrative and legal procedures in the U.S. He is also known to help his clients open foreign bank accounts and obtain anonymous bank cards, which would allow them to withdraw money anywhere in the world without leaving a trace. It has been theorized that Xavier could have used these services to disappear. Number 2, he could be living in disguise after carefully planning his disappearance himself. Perhaps he even obtained a fake passport and got plastic surgery. According to a retired police investigator, Jean-Marc Blanc, quote, "The problem in this case is that Xavier Dupont de Ligonnes looks a bit like everyone else with no strong features. He is of average height. Physically, he doesn't stand out. He's physically normal. And there's nothing worse in this situation than physically normal people, because they both stay unnoticed and they draw too much attention, end quote. Which would be proven to be true. They would get thousands of tips in this case, and they would all lead nowhere. Since Xavier was last seen near the water, some people also believe he could have gained access to a boat or a cargo ship. He could have gone to the nearby mountain paths or the highway and fled Italy. He could have boarded a train and gone to Croatia. So he could pretty much be anywhere. A third theory is that he's being aided by family or friends. Murdering and burying his entire family and 2 dogs would have been very difficult to do on his own. Xavier was very close to 2 men, Emmanuel Teneur and Michel Rediff, both of which were caught lying to police early on. These are also 2 of the few known people that Xavier openly discussed his thoughts of suicide with, the other one being the woman he had an affair with that we talked about in part 1. Investigators also noted Michel and Emmanuel's total devotion to Xavier throughout their entire investigation. We do know that Emmanuel and Michel had helped Xavier in the past financially. We also know that from April 10th to the 15th, 2011, Michel Rediff was traveling for business and to see his daughter in the same area that Xavier was, right after the murders. He was also in the Va April 13th through 15th, the same days Xavier was. They even visited the same tourist attraction on the same day, hours apart, and emailed each other from their respective hotel rooms. Michel emailed Xavier to ask if he was okay, and Xavier responded pretending to be the DEA, saying his phone was going to be shut off soon. Michel later denied having any knowledge that Xavier was in the area when questioned by police. Michel also completed suicide in March of 2018. Emmanuel initially told police he did not go to Xavier's home on April 9th, but he later changed his story. He also said he didn't have any guns and that neither did Xavier, when he actually owned a rifle and a handgun. He also told police he hadn't been able to get a hold of Xavier since the 1st of April, but according to phone records, on April 2nd, he talked to Xavier for 43 minutes at different intervals. On April 5th, they talked for almost 20 minutes. Emmanuel also got letters from Xavier dated April 9th, and none of these were postmarked, which would mean that the letters were delivered in person. Emmanuel passed from a heart attack in 2019. As for Xavier potentially getting any help from his family, we can't ignore Xavier's family's disturbing past. It is known that Agnes was scared of Genevieve, Xavier's mother. She made this known to her friends. And she seems to be capable of doing some dangerous things with her history of running the Philadelphia church, which appears to be a cult. This group also involved Christine, Xavier's sister, who never left the cult. We do know that Xavier reconnected with his mom and seems to become interested in the Philadelphia church in 2009. And although she denied speaking to Xavier often, police found that Christine had had 6 different telephone lines where she often spoke to Xavier. Christine's husband Bertram also sent Xavier 13,000 euros in the months leading up to the murders. Christine also, and this bothers me so much, waited a month and a half before telling investigators about her brother's disappearance. And obviously, police already knew at this point that Xavier was missing, but if you were that worried about your brother, why would you wait a month and a half to talk to police about it? Xavier's mother, Genevieve, also wrote a letter to the Church of Philadelphia on July 25th, 2011, 10 days after Xavier's last known whereabouts, in which she said, quote, "Agnes and the children are doing well and adapting well to new life. He often thinks of his mother, whom he loves dearly, and has not forgotten his savior." End quote. Now, this could just be Genevieve trying to respect Xavier's wishes and spreading this false story, but It could be possible Genevieve's church sect helped Xavier escape. Not to mention, Christine is who Xavier called the day of the murders. Police also searched Christine and Bertram's home not long after Xavier disappeared, and they found 13,000 euros, along with 6,000 euros in foreign currency. Much of the money had been separated into envelopes, prepared to be mailed out somewhere. Some wire transfer receipts were also found. Police believed the family was sending money to religious radicals who supported their beliefs around the world. But maybe they were paying off these powerful people that were helping Xavier stay hidden. It wouldn't be the first time that a church kept a dangerous person hidden. Christine's theories about her brother also have not always been consistent. At first, immediately following the family's disappearances, Christine voiced her doubts about the letter that Xavier supposedly sent. She didn't think it was legit. She said she had doubts that he and his family were actually put in witness protection. But in the following years, Christine changed her tune, claiming Xavier and his family had indeed been relocated to the US and that the family was alive and well in witness protection. And she also claimed the bodies found under the porch did not actually belong to Agnes and the children. But if that is the case, why wouldn't they all fake their deaths? Why just Agnes and the kids? It doesn't make any sense. Christine and her husband Bertram also ran this blog for a while. In 2013, Christine wrote about an email that Xavier allegedly sent to a couple of friends in 2010. According to Christine, Xavier speculated in this email about accidents that could happen to the family in the future and ended the email with a strangely chilling sentence. Quote, "So I hope that even after a police investigation, my parents, brothers, and sisters will never be led to believe that I intentionally caused these accidents, even if the evidence is strong." End quote. Xavier's family has taken this email as evidence of some type of conspiracy surrounding the family. That someone, for whatever reason, was planning to frame Xavier for the murder of his family, or that the family's entry into the witness protection program would somehow make it look as though Xavier had killed his family. However, what seems much more likely is that Xavier had been planning to kill his family for some time and was planting seeds to make his family believe his innocence well ahead of actually committing the crime. On this blog, Christine also wrote extensively about her doubts in Xavier being able to bury Agnes and the children underneath the porch. The space under the porch was only about 4 feet high, or 1.2 meters, meaning whoever buried the bodies there would have had to have been working on their hands and knees without the assistance of long tools like the shovel and hoe that Xavier had purchased. Xavier apparently had neck and back issues, so Christine claimed that he wouldn't have been physically capable of burying the bodies in this space. Well, then it's a good thing that he had days and days to do this, and that he may have allegedly had help. His family and friends also cited Xavier's apparent deep love of his family as reason to believe that he was not the one who murdered them. He was, according to those who knew the family, a very involved and caring parent. His friend Bruno, who was interviewed in Unsolved Mysteries, also pointed out Xavier's aristocratic lineage as evidence that Xavier would not have murdered his children. After all, Xavier took his noble roots very seriously, so by killing the kids, he was effectively wiping out his own lineage, especially when he murdered Thomas. Mr. Goldstein, a lawyer for the family, has also said, quote, "We don't even know when the victims were killed. The autopsy points to death between 10 and 21 days before their discovery. Such imprecision is truly astonishing. In reality, nothing is certain in this affair other than the fact that some bodies were found at 55 Boulevard Robert Schuman. The investigations were carried out, but all that they have allowed us to ascertain is that the bodies share the same DNA. No analysis has compared this common DNA with that of Agnes. Furthermore, my client confirms that the body's heights and weights do not correspond to the known dimensions of the family members. In my opinion, this constitutes negligence during the autopsy, but the autopsy allows Christine and Genevieve to step into the breach. What I also know is that one man alone cannot dig that hole under the patio, even a man blinded by rage and hatred. 2.5 cubic meters of earth was displaced. The affair is based on the idea that Xavier killed his family before burying them. No other line of inquiry has been explored. I don't know who killed this family. Nothing about their lives would lead me to believe that anyone would have it in for them to this extent. That is the conclusion of my clients. Since no one could have killed them, the fact is they are not dead. End quote. It's crazy to me that his whole argument is because no one would have wanted to kill them, they must not be dead. Like, okay, then whose bodies were those that they pulled out of the ground? Let's use Occam's razor for a second. What most likely happened is probably what happened. You have a mom and 4 kids and their 2 dogs that have been found dead under a patio, and a mom, 4 kids, and 2 dogs lived in that house. The husband's nowhere to be found, and he purchased some weird-ass shit before he murdered, allegedly, his entire family, and he wrote all these letters claiming he was in the witness protection program and the DEA and has never been seen again. So, like I said in part 1, 2 + 2 = 4. So the general consensus in French society, and very obviously my perspective, is that Xavier was a piece of shit who lived a lie and he wanted to start a new life, so he killed his family. I also naturally had to go into Reddit forums about this. There are so many different theories, and I came across some really interesting opinions, so I wanted to read some of them to you. This one comes from Reddit user another-npc-. They say, quote, "I recently watched a video discussing the similarities between the 2 cases. During the time Xavier was traveling in the United States, the 90s and early 2000s, the John List murders were extremely covered by the media. It's plausible that he drew inspiration from this case. The police also discovered a book titled Disparus à Jamais by Harlan Coben inside the Dupont de Ligonnès' family home. The literal translation of the title is Missing Forever, and the story revolves around a killer who vanishes after committing a murder. I believe Xavier was influenced by what he read or saw, but he was also very intelligent and fully capable of orchestrating a flawless murder all on his own. He boasted about his IQ of 150 to his sister, well above the average. Given the meticulous planning evident in the murders, it's likely that he possesses psychopathic tendencies." End quote. Now, obviously, there's a lot of speculation here. This is the only source that I have that Xavier allegedly had this book in his home and had an IQ of 150. And then also, I can attest to this, obviously, just because you have a book in your home about a serial killer or a true crime case doesn't mean that you committed this crime, but it is interesting, and I think the theory that he could have been inspired by John List is also interesting. The other thing I really want to get into is the whole witness protection thing, and I want to very quickly disarm that entire argument. To me, it doesn't make sense practically that the family could have gone into witness protection. Witness protection does not fake people's deaths. Their job is to relocate and protect federal informants and witnesses. While law enforcement sometimes will fake someone's death for the purpose of an investigation, like we sometimes see in hitman cases, this is not a long-term plan. While witnesses in federal protection have to cut their extended family out of their lives, they likely wouldn't be cruel enough to kill off his entire family. Also, if that were the case, why would they kill the dogs? The only way that this theory would work is if Xavier had faked his death for a little bit to ensure the family was safe, and then he came back out publicly in a federal trial, And with that transcript from the federal trial, which would be public record, we would be able to find the family was not actually dead, and they would go on to start their new lives. I found similar opinions on Reddit. I also liked this Reddit comment from Reddit user 0idea0. Quote, a French magazine called Society published a fascinating investigation about this case this summer. And I can tell you, after reading this detailed investigation, which evoked the entire life of de Ligonès, his youth, his friends, his dreams, his crooked personality, borrowed money to make people believe it was for a professional project, but used everything to buy expensive dinners and restaurants, etc., there's no doubt about the fact that he killed his family. He wanted to get rid of his family and didn't want people to know he was a liar and was not a perfect rich guy with religious values. I think he just wanted to follow his dreams, just like he tried to do in his youth, when he dreamt about being successful in America. And I can tell you that in France, everybody is convinced he is alive, enjoying his life on a beach somewhere. The investigation published by Society reinforced the idea he was a narcissist who did not want to be considered as a loser, and that he is a very manipulative man who used his friends. End quote. Xavier was also bilingual in English, and he had gone to America in the past. There have been a lot of allegations that Xavier had a past of having multiple affairs going all the way back to 2004, and all of these things could have contributed to him murdering his family, starting a new life, including in America. He also spoke Spanish, so some people have speculated he fled to South America. If you want my opinion, I think this does go back to the classic true crime trope, the husband did it. However, this case is much more methodical and complicated. The thought of killing your 4 children, your wife, and 2 dogs, all because you couldn't come to terms with your financial situation, is insane. But of course, anyone who could do this to their entire family must be. While cases of familicide are rare, by and large, there is a consistent history of domestic violence. Intimate partner violence had occurred previously in 70% of familicide cases. Only 25% of these prior domestic violence cases even appeared in arrest records, meaning only 25% of the 70% ended in some type of arrest. And a lot of times, people are not in jail for long for domestic violence. Much of the prior domestic violence was uncovered later through interviews with friends and family. Prior domestic violence is by far the #1 risk factor in cases of familicide. And after that, the other biggest risk factor is access to a gun. Something I also found very interesting is, according to this research, a past criminal history is not a reliable or significant predictor in murder-suicide. Of 408 homicide-suicide cases involving families, 91% of perpetrators were men and 88% used a gun. In another study involving 591 cases of family homicide followed by suicide, 92% of cases involved guns. In research for his book on this topic, Adams asked perpetrators who killed with guns if they would have used another weapon if their gun had not been available. By and large, they said no. Adams would later say, quote, the most common type of killer was a possessively jealous type, and I found many of the men who commit murder-suicide, as well as those who kill their children, seem to fit that profile. End quote. Familicides that are represented by men who kill their wives, children, and themselves are what the famous French sociologist Émile Durkheim has labeled anomic suicides, which are believed to occur when there are radical and significant changes in the perpetrator's social and economic environment. According to Richard Gels from the University of Pennsylvania, quote, anomic suicides occur after the rules of the game have changed. When what you thought would be true about your life and your family and your 401k and the loyalty of your company are suddenly disrupted. The perpetrators also often view their family as nothing more than possessions that they control, and aren't able to see boundaries between their identity, their wife, and their children. and the perpetrators can't bear to leave the believed source of their pain behind. So they take their wife and their children with them. End quote. I wanted to close out this episode with all of that information because I think it's really important for everyone to be aware of. I know that I didn't know much of anything about familicide. It's just something that has always horrified me and perplexed me. It goes to the absolute trenches of humanity, and I think it's good to know those statistics. By and large, the biggest indicator is a prior history of domestic violence and if you have access to guns. So this is something that we should all be aware of for our safety and for our loved ones' safety. If you believe you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, please know you are not alone and resources are available. Contact your National Domestic Violence Hotline. And that, everybody, is the perplexing and horrific story of the murders of the Dupont de Ligonnes family. Thank you so much for listening to this true crime deep dive. If you enjoyed the way this story was told, I would love it so much if you let me know. Drop a comment down below if you're watching on YouTube, like this video, and subscribe. Continue to follow along. If you're listening on a podcast platform, I would love if you left a 5-star review. Each time you do that, it boosts me up the algorithm and helps me get new listeners, and it'll help this story get out to more people. For people who are continuing to share this podcast with friends and family, thank you so much for doing that. It really, really helps so much, and I love you guys. Thank you again to Adelaide for requesting that I cover this story. And I'm really curious what you guys think about this case. There's so much to it. It's so insane. I want to hear your theories. Do you think that Xavier could be in the 1% to 2% and is still out there somewhere? Do you think he did it? He didn't do it? Do you think his family is helping him? Do you think he completed suicide? Do you think his friends helped him? Let me know. If you're listening on Spotify, you can drop a comment on this episode or shoot me a DM. Don't forget, all the pictures for this episode, if you guys are listening, will be on Instagram, so go check those out. And last but certainly not least, if you would love to support the show and if you want early and ad-free episodes, if you want to unlock over 60 episodes of bonus content, go check out patreon.com/Perplexity Mystery Podcast. I am covering the Gabby Petito Netflix documentary right now, and I have tons and tons of stuff on there for you. You'll really like it over there. It's a community, and it really helps support the show. You all are amazing. I hope you have a great week, and stay safe. I will talk to you next week. Bye.